want to talk a little bit about how you believe Facebook is handling this crisis. People are trying to report abusive content on Instagram, for example, whether it's drug content, anti-Semitic content, and they're getting messages back saying, we have too few people right now to handle this. We may not be able to prioritize your request because of the pandemic. How do you feel about Facebook's response so far? And can we really blame the coronavirus on these moderation issues, or has Facebook always underinvested in moderation?
I think that knowing the people that work there, I think everyone has the best of intentions. And if you could have planned for this and created a contingency plan for a global pandemic that would shut your business down, I think that would have been great. But I mean, let's be honest, very, very few businesses, if any, did. And what we're seeing now are the effects of effectively a very fat-tailed event, a very, very rare event. So I don't put the blame or onus on any one of these tech companies for not having seen this, because it's just such a rare event. The question is how you respond to it. And I think what you're beginning to see is that leaders like Mark and others have stepped up, and not only are they going live with doctors from the CDC, they're trying to get the word out, and I think they're setting great examples with their employees by keeping them home right now in this time. So while it is challenging and the response has been variable, I think that they're doing their best, and I think we'll see that they continue to try to do that going forward.
That said, you left Facebook in 2018, and I think it was pretty clear back then that you weren't pleased about how Mark Zuckerberg was running things. Zooming out a little bit, misinformation is one thing, redirecting folks from Instagram back to Facebook. What are your biggest concerns about Instagram's future right now? This is your baby. This is your creation.
Yeah, first I'll say that like the team that runs it now, I think they've been doing their best to grow what is a fantastic platform. And you're right, it is my baby, and Mike, my co-founder, feels exactly the same way. But like how proud we feel when we go on Instagram during a crisis like this, and you see people that aren't able to connect physically connecting digitally. You look at John Krasinski's Some Good News, and you see the way he's sharing some positive news during all of this to his followers and fans. You see people, artists going live, whether it's DJs or musicians, and serenading their fans in a moment of darkness. Like the creativity that comes out online on a platform like Instagram is really inspiring. And whether I run it or not is a completely separate question, but I'm very proud, as a parent from afar, seeing what the platform's become and seeing how people use it.
My colleague Sarah Fryer just came out with a book about Instagram called No Filter, and her conclusion is that Facebook is underinvesting in Instagram-specific problems. I wonder if you agree with that, and if so, does that concern you about whether Instagram's growth will falter? I mean, Instagram for investors is one of the great hopes of Facebook's overall growth. Should they be concerned that Instagram won't grow like it did?
Well, I haven't read the book. I did live the history, right? And I saw places where I think we invested appropriately and places where I wish we had invested more. But the truth of it is that we grew the platform to over 1 billion people, and you don't do that with nobody, and you don't do that with no resources. That being said, I don't know what's happening on the inside, and for me to speculate what investments have or have not been made is very difficult to do from the outside. But, if I were in charge of Facebook and I saw something like Instagram, I'd obviously invest a lot in it to make sure that, it becomes another pillar of the many products that we have as a company. And I think that's just the logical argument to make and the logical thing to do. And I think Mark's a very logical person, and hopefully he's following that.
Have you had any contact with him since you left? I mean, what's your relationship like now?
Yeah, we've seen each other a handful of times. It's amicable, I think. But the most important thing to keep here in mind is that, Silicon Valley is a really small place, and we're all very, very young. I mean, I'm 36, and my career doesn't end, last year or the year before. We're going to be around for a while, and we're going to be crossing paths. And I think it's really important to keep that in mind as you build relationships going forward.
That said, and I know we don't want to get into the palace intrigue here, but you haven't used Instagram since May of 2018.
Oh, no, that's not
Why
true
not?
at all. That's not true at all. Posting is very different than using. It's the first thing I
Okay.
check when I get up in the morning. I wouldn't know about the examples I just gave you about how Instagram's being used if I didn't check it incessantly.
So you haven't
When
posted, I should rephrase.
Yeah, and actually, to be fair, over the last 2 weeks, I have posted a bunch in my story about the work I've been doing with modeling. Part of this is a personal choice of deciding that when you leave something to, leave quietly and go have some introspective time on what matters to you. And part of it is just, wanting some privacy every now and then. But when I have something to say and something to share, I get really excited. And that's why I've been posting a lot about the work I've been doing recently. And I think you'll see that with RT.live. I think we'll probably be posting charts and updates and using Instagram what it's meant for, which is to give people a visual voice. And I'll make sure to do that as well.
So how has this pandemic, has it at all changed your plans for what's next? Your next act as an entrepreneur?
I think a lot about this question, mostly because I think everyone likes to plan life out. They like to have their 1, 3, or 5 year plan, or maybe people who are type A like me like to do that, right? And you never really know what curveballs are going to get thrown and how you're going to react. Now, I don't know how this, parlays into the next chapter, but what I do know is the technology that I'm using, whether it's machine learning or just general data science, will inform anything that I do in the future. And the only reason I got into this in the first place was because I had a passion for data science and for machine learning, and I wanted to apply that to problems that mattered to people. And I think that's what we've done with RT.live. And I think we'll see where it goes. I don't expect RT.live to become a company. I don't expect to be the CEO of it. But I wanted to have a resource that people could go to see what was happening in their communities in real time. And I feel like my talent or my skills were just best used in that way in this moment. And I hope it was for the better.
More broadly, Google has announced a hiring slowdown through the rest of the year. It's clear that the economy is going to take a massive hit from this. Do you think there's going to be a big impact on the Silicon Valley and tech economy if even a company as healthy, historically healthy like Google, is making these tough decisions?
Well, Google, remember, lived through the global financial crisis in 08, 09. I was there. I worked there, and I saw, everything from hiring freezes. I was working on the corporate development team. We stopped buying companies. The free snacks started to be different. As much as I joke, they took it very seriously at the time, and I think they learned a bunch of lessons. So I think companies that haven't gone through this type of thing, this type of disruption economically,
Many startups
are learning for the first time. But what's super interesting is we actually have a bunch of leaders who have gone through this before. And I think they're posting about their lessons having led through a crisis like this before. And hopefully, young leaders who are starting companies today will avoid those mistakes. But there's no way any company can avoid, the issues that we're having right now. It turns out everyone who buys advertising runs a normal business that sells things to normal consumers, and if you have advertising, you can't escape the cycle of the lack of income and the lack of jobs and the lack of spending that will eventually influence advertising spending. Now, some will come out, I think, more ahead than others depending on how useful the advertising they provide is, but that remains to be seen, and I guess we'll just have to see.
And is that going to be tough on Google, Facebook, and Instagram? I mean, these are advertising-driven businesses.
I think there's the short run and then there's the long run. In the short run, of course, it's got to be painful in terms of revenue. But these companies make a fair amount of margin. They have tons of cash lying around. This isn't like these companies are going to go bankrupt tomorrow and you won't see them ever again. That's not true for all companies, by the way, but the ones you're asking about specifically have an enormous amount of stockpile of cash sitting around, and I think they'll weather the storm. And in the long run, hopefully this kind of pressure makes all of these companies better because they have to deliver even more on the promise for the promise that they give effective advertising to businesses. So again, I think we'll have to see.